Hi and welcome to Standout Teaching, and this is a walkthrough of the Lesson Doughnuts planning template. So what you see in front of you is the template itself with the 7 steps which you work through one at a time to plan your lesson. And the aim of this is to end up with a lesson that is student-centered, that fulfills all the different requirements of a lesson, and is also engaging. You can use this as well as an initial planning template because it's actually quite quick to work through, and that can then be worked in conjunction with a full lesson planning template depending on what you actually use within your school. So as a quick talk through of this, in the first box, the first donut, is to put in your lesson objectives. If you're using Sky High questions, the strategy from Standout Teaching, you may want to put that in there as well. What you want to make sure as well is when you do this particular box is make sure that they are challenging so it stretches the students. Next step, is what would you like the students to actually do in the lesson? So it might be that you're doing a practical activity, that's a written assessment or so on. So it's just a summary of what they're going to do within the lesson. Step 3 then is to start thinking about during the lesson how you're actually going to assess the students' progress. There's some suggestions here which you can just circle depending on what you want to use, or if you're using a different method you could just make a note of it underneath here. And bear in mind with this template, it's all very brief notes that you're dropping in here, so nothing too detailed. Bullet points are great. Right, so if we then move over to section number 4, this is just something to think about, and what you need to consider at some point in your lesson is if during box number 3 you're giving them feedback or they're giving themselves feedback, at some point in the lesson it would be extremely useful if they use that feedback, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes time. So number 5 is the lesson donut. This is just timings. So what you actually do here is you work around the donut, split it up into sections to show each of your activities. And if you look at the Standout Teaching website, it'll explain to you in more detail about how to develop a lesson donut. Finally, down here is step number 6 to consider is differentiation. Yet again, if you're using the GAP strategy from Standout Teaching, it's when are you actually going to use this. And then the final step is when do you wish to use literacy within the lesson as well. So yet again, if it's from Standout Teaching, this is the connect strategy. So the final stage then is this middle section here. And this is the sequence of activities that you're using within the lesson. So box number 1 up here would probably be your starter. So a very brief note of what you're going to do for your starter. If that leads, for example, into a student activity, you want to then plot that in and so on and work your way through your lesson until you get to the end of it, which will probably be your plenary. You don't have to use all of these boxes, it's entirely up to you how many activities you have going during your lesson. Right, the final and probably the most important stage of this is these little things here, these little donuts. What you want to do is look at each of your activities, then look at the sequence of questions around the outside, and what you want to do is just cross-reference where they are being used. And what this will make you do is reflect upon the structure of your lesson to make sure, for example, that you're applying differentiation at the correct places. If you're making sure you've got your literacy support in there, to make sure that you've assessed at the right time. So for example, you might put in a Q&A activity here, and then making sure as well that they have time to act upon this assessment. So yet again, if you did a Q&A activity here, what you may well want to do then is do a student activity where they follow up upon that and apply what they've actually learned. So that is a very quick through of the lesson donut template. Full guidance is in the Lesson Doughnuts ebook, which is available on the Standout Teaching website. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.